This is the Business Owners IT Podcast with Anthony Garish and Ryan Carter, where tomorrow's technology meets today's conversations.
Hi, I'm Tony Garish.
And I'm Ryan Carter, and this is the Business Owners IT Podcast.
A podcast where we discuss tips, tricks, and solutions for business owners involving all things tech.
So let's dive right in to a deep dive.
A deep dive. What are we going to talk about today, Ryan?
Oh, we're not going to do a weekly review or anything. We're just going to talk a little bit because we bring them up a lot of times. Is ThreatLocker. And You've been doing some very interesting stuff with it. So I'm just going to let you start the conversation and see where we go from there.
Yeah, so ThreatLocker has quite a few modules, right? So
just real quick, what exactly is ThreatLocker?
Yeah, so that's where I was going to go
Sorry.
into the modules, right? So one of the modules is application whitelisting. So our application allow listing or program allow listing, whatever you want to call it, right? So nothing runs on your computer unless it's been approved in advance, right? So everything's locked down by default, right? And only programs that run with it is the programs that you allow or that we allow. Okay, so and you could think, man, that might be a big headache, but they have a down path. There's a learning process. You learn that computer. You know what software is on there. Right, you future-proof software that updates all the time, and they have a lot of built-ins. But like QuickBooks and is one that updates a lot, and CDK sometimes gets a lot of updates. FedEx, right? Yeah, UPS, right? Because we whitelist those. So that's the one. That's the bread and butter of ThreatLocker, right? It's a great tool because malware and ransomware and all that, it's just software, right? So if we can not allow any software to run, then it's going to block that. So that's, one of them. The other thing they have is storage control and network control. And they have a couple other ones too, but I think those are the three that we need to talk about the most. But things I've been doing with network control is I didn't want anybody to be able to remote desktop into my computer at home or into my wife's computer or my computer. So, I actually worked with ThreatLocker and Danny actually helped with this too. And he's one of the founders of ThreatLocker. And what we did is we said that the only computers that can remote desktop into my computers, my few computers, is defined in a list in ThreatLocker. So they all have remote desktop capability, but right now the only person or people that can get into it is my wife and I. And we did that through looking at the computer it's coming from and looking at the computer it's going to. And that's really powerful, right? Because you can't get into it. You can't just remote desktop into it, and I'm actually controlling the identity of who's getting into my computers, and plus it's logging it. That was something that was really cool. I struggled to get it to work through the VPN, and that's where those guys came in. And then we got it working through the VPN, and we had to do some firewall logs as well. But it's cool stuff.
So I got your domain administrator password.
Yeah.
I can get into anything. Can I get into this? Can I remote there with my domain admin?
You will not be able to remote there because you will not be. You will not. Your user inside of ThreatLocker is not allowed to see it. It doesn't matter if you're an administrator domain.
And that's powerful. That's powerful,
right? So it doesn't matter. It won't. You won't even know it's open. Actually, you won't even know that the remote desktop is exposed to the. I don't want to say to the internet, but exposed to the LAN. Right? You'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go there, it just will seem like it's not there. But you look in the ThreatLocker logs, you'll see that it's been blocked.
Okay. So let me ask you another one.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some files on the server.
Yep.
And someone else in my company has a domain admin password also. So, they could probably go in and change the authentication for those so that they could look at them. How with ThreatLocker? Is ThreatLocker able to stop, say, those people from looking?
Sure. So let's talk through this scenario because I just recently did this as well. So we have a situation where it doesn't matter who it is, right? We have a situation where the domain admin password is known by, let's say it's a co-managed situation or whatever. It's known by some IT person or some tech on premise, right? But the owner comes up to me and says, hey, I don't want anybody getting into my personal drive, right? So there's two ways to do that. And the old school way is you go into you go into the domain controller and you take away the permissions, and you only give permissions to the authenticated users that are supposed to have access to that. But I'm a domain admin, so what can I do?
Keys to the kingdom.
Keys to kingdom, right? I just go back and I take away I add domain admin, or I add myself for a minute, right? It goes through, scrolls through, I get what I want, then I take myself out of there and I go undetected, right? Well, with ThreatLocker, what we can do is say, and ThreatLocker lives before the Windows credentials. So what I did with ThreatLocker is I said only John Doe can get to this file or this folder on this server, down to what folders I wanted them to do, right? And it didn't matter, what I did on the domain controller side, right? They did not have access to the file. It was blocked.
Yeah.
And then ThreatLocker has, nobody has access to ThreatLocker but, a few of our techs.
Yeah. And, actually you were doing testing on this at ours, and we have an accounting folder that I actually have access to. I can get to. But when you put in the ThreatLocker policy, I was unable to get to that folder.
Yeah. So what I did was, it was more for testing, right? But I mean, obviously you could always add yourself, but even internally, we have some folders that are protected. They're protected by security groups. They're protected by whatever, but if the tech had access to RMM, or the tech had access to the network, right? They could potentially try to browse out to a folder and see the data.
Yep.
Right. So using ThreatLocker, again, it supersedes everything, right? I put in there that the only people that can get to this folder, and I'm not going to mention the folder, is certain people, myself, my wife, and now Ryan. That's it. My personal drive, that's what I tested. I blocked everybody, and I don't want anybody to get into to see my user drive or my OneDrive. So using ThreatLocker storage control, I was able to do that.
Yeah.
And we just had another scenario that I haven't really spoken with you about, but I have a accountant that wants to allow somebody to test with UltraTax. So I was working on this last night. The same thing. I set up a special user, and I created the user, and I only gave him permission to UltraTax 2023 using ThreatLocker. So now I'm going to have, and I'm going to also use the RDP stuff part of it too. We're going to allow them to RDP into a computer that will be exposed to the internet but protected by the firewall and ThreatLocker. And he's going to use the UltraTax to test, right? He won't be able to get anywhere. He won't be able to browse to any of my thinking. He won't be able to do anything except UltraTax, because we blocked all the storage, and we're blocking his ability to access the LAN through ThreatLocker. And it's super powerful because I have a virtual desktop, right, that I want to use for everybody else, but this one user I don't want to have access. So, so tomorrow when I log in as administrator, I have full access to everything. But if I log in as the user I created for UltraTax, I don't have access to nothing.
Powerful
stuff.
Yeah, that's really good. Really, really good.
And the logging and stuff in ThreatLocker is super great. And when you do have something, you have all those pieces, right? You get to see all the applications that are running. Mm-hmm. You get to see all the storages that being hit, and you get to see all the network traffic. Mm-hmm. Which leads into ThreatLocker Ops. That's a new tool they have too, which we're interested in it. We're just not there yet. Mm-hmm. And they keep adding features all the time.
Yep. So I got one that our techs are kind of a little mad at us for.
They're asking me today, what's going on here?
So we turned on the blocking of USB drives, and I think this is a good thing for even you business owners. Who's plugging in USBs in your office, and now we're starting to figure out who's doing it at our office, and it's good. They do need to have these USB drives, but it's good to have an inventory of these drives, and the best way of doing it is with ThreatLocker. If you block USB drives, the only way to allow it is by the serial number of that drive, and actually you can do it by the serial number of that drive, and if that computer is protected by ThreatLocker, and if that drive's encrypted. So you can really add a lot of security levels to those USB drives, and you can get them so they don't automatically start.
Yeah, and actually that's true. Then I mean, if we can do all of that stuff, then we should make them encrypt their hard. We should make them have to BitLocker that drive before they actually plug it in.
Yeah.
So that if they lose it, then all the data on it won't be actually seen. But yeah, that happened today. Justin says, "Man, I can't plug in this USB drive, blah blah blah." So I get on the horn on Teams and I'm saying, "What are we doing here? Why can't this guy can't do his job?" And he says, "Oh, right." He says, "Oh, that policy is actually working," and it was pretty fast. I right clicked on it and allowed him, and away we went. But yeah. It's like we don't usually try to do that with our customers where we roll stuff out and not tell anybody.
No,
it never happens, I swear. But in this case, it was an easy fix, and the tech could use the USB drive. He had a legitimate thing for it, but obviously we know USB drives can be used to distribute malware, steal data.
Yeah, so much. I mean, you've got you talked about Danny. He pushes the rubber ducky that can just pretty much hack into any computer. It just depends on how you do it, but there's ways of it that it does. And that 5 minutes of headache just gives you so much more safety.
Yeah,
just so much.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing. Ryan mentioned the rubber ducky. That's basically a USB drive that looks like a USB drive, but it's really a keyboard, right? And then when you plug it in, it acts as a keyboard. It starts typing out commands. Nice thing about ThreatLocker is you can plug that USB stick in, and it could start typing out commands for PowerShell and some other things. But guess what? PowerShell is ring fenced, which is another feature of ThreatLocker, and we don't allow PowerShell to talk to the internet. PowerShell doesn't need to talk to the internet. So if PowerShell can't talk to the internet, it can't download ransomware through a keyboard, So even if you get a command line or something like that, PowerShell does not have access to internet.
Yeah, and you did bring up ring fencing, and real quick, that is a cool piece of that product.
Yeah.
Because you open up Microsoft Word, it's only going to do what Word is supposed to do. It's not going to run exe files or scripts or anything. And it, just like command prompt, it shuts it down from reaching out to the internet or running exe programs or just certain things that it just shouldn't be doing. And PowerShell does not need to go out to the internet. Chrome itself does not need to be using PowerShell.
Exactly. Chrome or Internet Explorer doesn't need to be. I guess it's Edge now, but it doesn't need to have access to PowerShell. And if it does, then we have a way to allow that to go. But another one when I first got ThreatLocker was pretty amazing was WebEx. I could not believe. Now WebEx, again, I've talked before in some previous podcasts about old software. WebEx is one of the original Zooms or the original or GoToMeeting. You guys remember those two? Well, WebEx. When you launch WebEx, it touches every single file on your computer. And when they were showing this, I said, why does it need access to my desktop for files? Why is it looking and touching every one of these files? Nice thing about it is, the built-in from ThreatLocker ring fences it, don't get to see any of that stuff. It doesn't need access to it.
Yep, doesn't collect that data anymore because that's what they're trying to do is collect data.
Yeah. So, and ThreatLocker too, I'll tell you originally why we did ThreatLocker. Why did we do ThreatLocker is because I had some friends who owned IT companies that their customers were compromised because of RMM vulnerability.
Yeah.
Right? Or RMM hack, where it was actually the company got hacked and pushed out bad code again, right, to all their customers, and they encrypted them. This was 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was on January 6th or something. It happened right before the 4th of July. And it wasn't a week later. It said, okay, man, we can't have this. So ThreatLocker also helps protect, our customers from our tools that we deploy.
Yeah.
Because you cannot create commands and PowerShells and things like that and run them on your system, our customer system, without them first being listed inside of ThreatLocker.
Yeah, only allow these certain remote viewing programs. Right. Only allow these certain RMMs. Don't update my RMM until it's time. Don't let it do its thing. It just, yes.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps us up for this week, Tony.
Yeah. So I'd like to thank everybody again for tuning in to the Business Owners IT Podcast, and we hope to see you next week.
See you.
Unique Computing Solutions. Your IT challenges solved.